welcome to Networking Your Way to Success, sponsored by the new ABA Legal Career Central. Moderating the program today is Avery Blank. Avery is a board member of the ABA's Legal Career Central, where she uses her legal training as a consultant and is a nationally recognized women's advocate. She was previously a senior law and policy analyst with the Center for Health and Homeland Security at the University of Maryland, devising crises plans and advising clients. She also served as a trainer on goal setting and personal development at the Ms. JD 2014 Conference on Women in the Law. Avery, you may proceed with the program.
Great. Hello. I'm Avery Blank, board member for the ABA's Legal Career Central and a Philadelphia-based consultant, women's advocate, and career coach. So today's program is going to focus on networking and the relationships that you build that are critical to the success of your career and your organization. Today we're going to discuss the importance of networking in the law, how to network effectively, and maximizing your networking in diverse settings and with people of diverse backgrounds. The American Bar Association's Legal Career Central hosts a job board where you can search and apply for opportunities, upload your resume, receive email alerts when new jobs are posted, as well as post job opportunities if you're an employer. And to see those, you go to www.abalcc.org. And we have two great speakers with us today, Joel Stern and Monica Zent. Joel is the CEO of the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms, or NAMWOLF. It's a nonprofit trade organization comprised of over 150 firms across the country. And Joel is based in Chicago and a true champion for diversity. We also have Monica Zent, who is the founder of Zent Law, a San Francisco-based law firm, and Foxworthy, the first private social network for lawyers. So let's get back to networking. Briefly put, networking can be thought of as an interaction with others and exchange of information for career advancement, and it can be done in person or online. So today we're going to cover the top issues on networking, some networking tips, answer some of your questions as the audience, and then finish with some key takeaways. So let's jump right into the first topic. So we know some lawyers dislike or even cringe at the idea of networking. Some might even feel like they're using people. So is networking really all that important in the legal profession, and why? Monica, can you speak to this?
Yes, thanks, Avery. I'd be happy to. First of all, it's great to be here, and thank you for putting together the program. Yeah, absolutely. Networking is critical. I mean, law is a relationships business. So if you are not networking, you're definitely missing out. There are a number of benefits from networking. I would say there are probably three key benefits. First of all, it's building relationships. And again, because law is a relationship business, building relationships through networking is going to pay back in spades. I mean, you're going to have relationships that you can rely upon if you're developing business, or you're looking for that next career move, or maybe you're looking to go into a slightly different field within the law. And so relationships are the keys that open the doors to wherever it is you want to go. And they also build, relationships. You're building relationships with people that you're going to be working with potentially for a long time, or may get to know on a different level. I would also say another key benefit is social selling. The ability to engage on a level that produces real fruit, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later in the program. But the idea of getting your name out there, getting your brand out there, why it's important that lawyers should be thinking about a brand, and engaging in social selling, in terms of cultivating relationships that are, again, going to actually open doors for you, and doing that in a way that's authentic and in a way that creates a relationship that has lasting impact. And I would say another key benefit, or the third key benefit of networking, is really productivity. Ultimately it's about not just having a network, but also using that network, leveraging that network to get more done. And I can speak to these concepts not only having owned a law firm for many years and practiced in-house, spent a lot of time in the legal market, but also as a founder of a social media company for lawyers. It's really about taking your network to the next level. And that's what it's about with Foxworthy, but it's really about taking your network to the next level and producing fruit, engaging in social productivity, engaging with your network in a way that allows you to be productive, but also allows you to help others in a way that helps them be productive as well. And that forges stronger relationships in the end.
And Joel, what do you think?
Well, first, I 100% agree with Monica, and also it is great to be here today. Secondly, I have a unique perspective on this because of my career. I mean, for many years I was in-house counsel and saw the importance of networking from the law firms that wanted to get in our door and do business. When I left Accenture after 15 years, I ended up working with law firms, teaching them how to sell, and obviously networking is a very important element. And now in my relationship as the CEO of NamWolf, I mean, a huge part of my job is brokering relationships between the law firms and in-house counsel, and the importance of networking and those that are good at it is absolutely critical. Another interesting perspective, in the 1980s when I started practicing law, you didn't hear a lot about networking or relationships, and as a buyer of outside counsel services, we basically spent 90% of our time looking for lawyers that could substantively do the work. I've seen this evolve over time where today many people that procure outside counsel legal services are looking for not only lawyers that are great and smart and can win, but lawyers they want to be with and they like as people. And networking is a critical component of that.
Monica, do you agree with him?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Joel made some excellent points about the fact that it's really about, that sort of authenticity, and it's about liking that person that you're networking with. It's not just, oh, let's exchange a business card, which, by the way, who's exchanging business cards anymore? You should be using LinkedIn and social media and exchanging your information that way as much as possible. But it's really about the authentic interaction with whoever it is that you're building that relationship with, and forging some kind of bond. It may be there's something in common. Maybe you have the same alma mater. Maybe you grew up in the same town, or some of the same people, or maybe you don't have anything in common, but in which case you want to surface and find out, what is that common thread, and how can you connect with that person, on a human level. And I think I definitely agree to Joel's point. Those forge, the strongest connections those that are built on authentic interaction.
Okay, so then what about networking, or as you prefer to call it, building relationships effectively? So about networking effectively, how do you do it, and what mistakes might lawyers or law students make? Joel, would you like to start?
Sure, and I'm glad you're using the word relationship building. I may be in the minority, but networking has never been a word that I was personally comfortable with, and I've always used the term relationship building, and I used to refer to it as the currency of business. I've now expanded my thinking on that and really call relationship building the currency of life. It's just so critical in everything we do, and obviously social media and technology have added to that. My perspective on networking, what works, and this is really for whether you're a law student, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a law firm, whether you're in the government, whether you're in the position that I'm in right now, is you start with the word authenticity. And some people think that's a cliche. I personally believe it's one of the most important things that I look at when I'm interfacing people. Fakeness and lack of authenticity is such a turnoff. We appreciate people are not perfect. We appreciate that not every word that comes out of people's mouths is not going to be what they meant to say. We appreciate imperfections. What we don't appreciate when we interrelate with people is fakeness. It's trying to be something they're not, because we're smart and most of us can see through it. So authenticity is critical, and lack thereof is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see. Another mistake that I often see is when we're not able to adapt and be spontaneous. I'll tell you a story. It just occurred a few days ago. I went and met with a general counsel of a Fortune 500 company, and I did my homework and I laid out a plan, and I had pages 1 through 12 set up on all the things that I want to talk about and all the things that I want to achieve. I had lunch with him, and the hour and a half passed, and I realized I didn't cover 1 through 12. What I did cover is I understood that we first started off at Sears many years ago as practicing law. We both had 3 daughters. We both love sports. And we started talking about what we have in commonality, and I realized very quickly that that was probably a more important meeting that I would have ever achieved if I gotten 1 through 12 done, because he has already sent me a note. When can we have the next lunch? I want to talk about NAMWOLF and how we can use the 152 law firms across the United States. So the ability to be spontaneous, the ability to adapt, the ability to take the time to learn about the other person and find opportunities and commonality are critical.
That's a great story, Joel. Thanks for sharing. And Monica, what do you think about that in terms of authenticity and adaptability?
Yeah, absolutely. All excellent points by Joel. And I would just say, to add to that, if I may, I guess another common mistake that folks would make with networking opportunities or relationship building, of course, interactions is really lack of preparedness. Not being prepared for that interaction. And lawyers are busy. It's hard to always have sufficient time. But trying to make some time to be able to prepare for that interaction, whether it's a one-on-one, or it's an event that you're attending, and you're looking at sort of targeting the opportunity to speak with certain individuals. Doing some preparation about them, about where they're, maybe where they're working, what firms are they at, or what companies are they at. What's important to them, if you're able to find that out. If they've been writing and speaking, what have they been writing and speaking about? Something that allows you to be able to be effective. And so I would definitely say being prepared. And then kind of, a similar point to Joel's about authentic, when you're actually engaging with that person, taking the time to get to know them. I do see this mistake at events and cocktail parties where people are just kind of working the room and they're going around passing out cards. And it's just not effective. It can be off-putting, and it just shows that somebody doesn't really understand, the art of networking. And it really is about getting to know people. And as Joel indicated with his anecdote, having that time to connect, even for a few minutes, or maybe it's over a lunch or dinner, but being able to talk on a human level about someone, get them to share a little bit more about themselves, their interests, hobbies, family, whatnot. You can connect on a human level, and that connection is going to be more memorable. I'm also a huge fan of just being relaxed, at events and interactions. A lot of times I find that when people are awkward, when they're trying to sort of build relationships, the mistakes they make come from the fact that perhaps they're nervous or they're being awkward, and so it comes off as a bit forced or contrived, as opposed to coming off relaxed and, again, authentic. So just trying to be relaxed and going in, to any event or networking opportunity, with a very relaxed frame of mind, and that's going to come off as more genuine when you're speaking with that person.
Joel, do you have anything else to add?
No, I agree. It's interesting. Last night I was at an event in Chicago, and I was talking to a law professor about this. I wished that law school would teach this in the 3rd year of law school, because so many great, smart lawyers come out of law school that are all ready to do a great job but haven't learned how to do this and haven't learned of the importance of it. And you're going to make mistakes. You have to have the courage to be comfortable in what you're doing. You have to learn from others. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. You have to acknowledge with people when you're not perfect. So I've been in rooms where people come up to me and acknowledge, hey, I'm a little bit nervous. Can you help me? And I have to tell you, I've never met anybody in 30-plus years of practicing that said, no, I'm not going to help you. There was a person at an event last night that was looking to be able to find opportunities to speak with people, and you could just see that she was a little bit nervous. So, grab her hand, bring her, introduce her to people you know. But, take challenges, take a chance. The other element that I think is critical is never assume you know the values of the people that you're meeting with, because everybody has different values. Our corporations have different core values. Law firms do. Individuals do. Take the time to figure out what's critical to the people that you're speaking with, and you will find, again, that level of commonality that will allow you to take it to the next step. The other thing is networking is like planting seeds. Very rarely do you network and the next day you get instantaneous gratification for whatever you're looking for. You are planting seeds. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, several of them are going to sprout and be beautiful plants, but a few are not going to lead to anywhere, and that's okay. So set your expectations right when you're networking. If you're a law student and your goal is to meet with 10 companies and the next day get 10 job offers, I don't think that's realistic. if your goal is to create an environment where you can make that next call, send that next email, get coffee, have lunch, and look at it as a journey with a destination point, I think you're going to be much more comfortable in what you're trying to do with respect to networking.
Great. And Monica and Joel, you both mentioned how important it is for those to be prepared when networking. What are the skills that lawyers have that lend themselves, to be able to network? Are there any tricks that that they can use in their arsenal that they have as a lawyer?
Sure, I can jump in here, Avery. I mean, absolutely. Lawyers. To get through law school, and many of us have gone beyond, law school as well. To get through, academically, lawyers are often, very gifted with, being able to obviously retain information and to retrieve it, when they need to. And I would, definitely use that skill. I would use the skill of being able to retain and retrieve information, use memory tricks, all kinds of things that we as lawyers use in practice, as well as, when we're doing public speaking, is being able to kind of use those tricks and tips to be able to retain information about your prospects. I mean, it's not uncommon, if I was to go to an event and there were, let's say, a number of prospects, maybe 50 different prospects, to study and memorize the names, as much as possible beforehand, and to memorize what companies they're with, and, what is their background and where do they go to school. And it sounds like a lot of information, but it can be done. And it may not be 50 names, but being able to try to get a handle on as much as you can about the people that you're going to be meeting, and have that information ready, at your fingertips. And if you can't memorize it all, or you're not comfortable with that, maybe put it on an index card and put it in your purse, or put it in your suit pocket, and pull that out and just take a peek at it, of the person's name, what company are they at. Oh, right, okay, this person's at this company. That's right. And then it'll trigger your memory of what you wanted to talk about with them. So if you're attending events or conferences, conventions, those are helpful tips. And I would definitely say that you want to, again, be prepared as much as you can. And sometimes there's not always sufficient time to do sufficient preparation, but do as much as you're able. Social media is a great tool for that. We have lots of information at our fingertips on social media. People should be on LinkedIn. They should be on Twitter if they can. Maybe they've got a Facebook page, of course, on Foxworthy as well. And being able to access information about your prospects or people that you'd like to meet, and look at their profiles and look at their information, and be able to gather, what you need about them, and try to memorize as much as you can.
Great. All right. Well, let's go on to our third top issue. How can you maximize your networking in diverse settings and with people of different backgrounds? Joel, what do you think?
Well, sure. And since obviously diversity and inclusion is a passion of mine, this is obviously a hot topic for me. I mean, it is human nature to be very comfortable with people that look like us and act like us and come from the same social economic status that we come from. And that's easy, and most of us are very good at networking in that environment. But that's not the world we live in, and everybody knows it. It's not our customers, it's not our outside counsel, if we're internal counsel, it's not our legal departments, hopefully. So this is an area where we have to step out of our comfort zone and really take active steps to learn how to do it. A couple of things that I recommend. Number one, be yourself, and you're going to hear that theme repeated throughout, because once again, I think it's one of the most critical elements of networking. Number two, and I learned this from Vernee Myers, who's an implicit bias expert that I just think is top-notch in this area. Ask people about their differences. Be inquisitive. Cultural awareness, the only way to be culturally aware other than doing the research is ask the questions. Understand where they're coming from. Understand what makes them tick. Understand why they think differently or act differently depending on where they come from, or the color of their skin, or whether they're male or female. Empathetic listening is another key point. For years, names was very difficult for me. And when the name wasn't John Smith or Joel Stern, it was even harder for me. And I used to blame it on me, and it's just something I wasn't ever going to be good at. And then I realized that may be true, but the perception for those that I'm dealing with is that I'm not taking the time to memorize their name or even be able to say their name, because it's a little bit difficult. When you're dealing with different people with different names than your own, spend the time to understand how to pronounce it. It makes a huge difference. Going back to Vernee Myers again, I mean, the spelling of her name looks like it's Verna. And I love the fact that every time I've ever networked with her, I always say Vernee, and I think I'm one of the few that always gets it right. But I think that is perceived by her as me taking the time to understand that not all names look the same way. And I think it shows compassion. I think it shows respect. And I think this very little example, it suggests that we both want to develop a better relationship. So empathetic listening, I think, is critical in a diverse environment.
And Monica?
Yes, yes. Just to add to that, I mean, absolutely. You know, my grandfather had a saying that everyone has a story, and I've always believed that. You know, people have a story wherever they come from. You know, some are harder than others, and some people have been through more than others. But we all have a story, and taking the time to understand a little bit more about somebody, again, on that human level, it goes a long way. And you know, putting sort of the business aside, you know, when you're first meeting somebody, as you know, kind of Joel's anecdote illustrated, you know, putting the business aside and just trying to get to know that person on a human level, it really goes a long way. I mean, I've seen this time and again in my own life. I've seen it, you know, in the lives of others, and respecting, again, the fact that, you know, you don't want to approach networking with sort of a myopic perspective, but understanding that there's a lot to be learned and gained from people with different perspectives and different backgrounds. And you know, that's the beauty of networking. It's not just forging relationships with people who look like you or have similar backgrounds or went to the same kinds of schools or grew up in the same kinds of towns, you know, but you know, who come from very different backgrounds, and sharing those perspectives, you know, can open lots of interesting doors, and it can also open, you know, up new ways of thinking about things. And you know, this sounds maybe hard in the abstract, but I would just, you know, give a couple of examples. I mean, for instance, there are a number of people I've met and networked successfully with over the years and built relationships with that are quite strong, and I've never really met them in person. I've met them through social media, and we've interacted and communicated. We've talked by phone. These are fellow lawyers. They, you know, call upon me for advice when they need help. I've helped them. You know, if there's an opportunity for them to make an introduction or to open a door for me, they've been able to do that. And these are strong relationships that have been forged. These are people with very different backgrounds, completely different, you know, areas of practice. They're in different parts of the country. I mean, again, I have, you know, sort of no limitation on the ability to sort of network, and I would encourage people to always look at networking with a very, very open perspective. You know, not just foreclosing the opportunity to network with somebody with someone just because of, you know, oh, well, this person is a law student. What are they going to do for me? You know, they're brand new. I don't have time for that. That's a very myopic perspective. Where could that person be in 10 years? And helping them now at this stage is going to, you know, it's going to open doors for them that they'll never forget. They'll never forget that relationship with you and what you did to help them. You know, and similarly, you know, somebody who perhaps, you know, is in a different field. Maybe, you know, you're in private practice, or, you know, and then you're networking with somebody in-house, you know, but maybe they're not a client. Will they be in the future? So again, keeping an open perspective is always helpful.
Monica, I love the points you made, and just two add-ons. Number one, I always tell people diversity and inclusion should be fun, and when it works, it is fun, and it enriches your experience not only in dealing with lawyers, but it makes you a better person as well. And I've found that the more that I deal with different cultures and people with different backgrounds and people that think differently, however you want to define diversity and inclusion, the stronger I am, not only as a lawyer and as a CEO of NAMWA, but as a person. And I have found that networking within diverse environments has personally enriched me and made me better at what I want to be as I look at my career. The other thing about networking with non-lawyers, I just tell this fun little vignette. I remember a law firm was trying to get into in-house legal group and couldn't get in there. And just by happenstance, in the way that this lawyer was very good at networking, this lawyer got to know the secretary in-house and realized that the secretary's mother was very good friends with the general counsel. And because this person took the time to network with the secretary and empathetic listening and understand what makes the secretary tick and making the secretary feel good, she got into the door of the general counsel, and that law firm ended up doing business for the corporation. So your point about not only networking with those in the same profession, I think, is critical for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that time and again, even for years building business with the firm. You know, most of the time, you know, I've always told people on my team, you know, never forget the people who are not necessarily our clients as well. You know, always remember there are people that, you know, of course the clients that you're serving, but there are also other people within the company that you may have an opportunity to interact with, you know, the assistants of the people, the business people that you're working with, or, you know, folks in other walks of the company. And that's very important because then, you know, when those people move on or go to another organization, they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember, okay, that team of lawyers, you know what, they're all great people. You know, they're so nice to deal with. They do great work. But you know, it's going to precede you as you go into the next opportunity or as they move on into another opportunity. So yeah, I mean, definitely I've been a big believer of making friends with the janitor all the way to the CEO and making an impression on those people. You never know where people end up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone's important, right? So it's incredible and very important to network with all different types of people from all walks of life. So let's go on to our quick tips. So Joel, you mentioned it's important to be authentic and that it's harder to come across as genuine online. But your first tip here is to network across distances. Can you help our listeners understand what you mean by that?
Sure. Well, and first of all, you know, from a personal perspective and preference, I love networking in person in small groups. That's my favorite way. Everybody has different favorites. But the reality is, in today's world we live in, with LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all the other social media ways of doing business, we have to learn how to do this. And it's fun for me because my comfort level with LinkedIn is great. My comfort level with Twitter is at the embryonic stages, and I'm still learning it and looking at what you're doing, Avery and Monica, and just doing great things. But I'm sure at one stage, level of your time, you were very similar to me. Online, it's a little bit different because people read the words the way they read them from the person that's sending it. So if somebody sends you an email and you know that person, sometimes you're putting your own accentuations on things that maybe they didn't mean. You just got to be a little bit more careful when you're using more informal but critical technology. You can't be as informal and casual on LinkedIn where maybe on Twitter you need to be. On LinkedIn, you know, one of my pet peeves is when somebody sends me a notice to connect and the next day they're asking me for business. And it just doesn't, you know, that to me is not the way to use technology to get, at least make me receptive to wanting to do business with. So, you know, the advice that I would give is when you're using technology to talk to folks around the world, you know, just practice doing things some different. You know, be a little bit more formal when you're on LinkedIn. Once again, do your homework, as Monica says, which is critical. Know where that person's coming from, know where they've been, know what excites them, what bores them. Just be very careful there. And the other thing is there's nothing wrong with when you get involved with somebody on a LinkedIn perspective. Once you start talking to the person, ask them how they like to communicate the most. They may say by email, they may say by phone, they may say come and meet me. That's another important thing. So even though you're starting with the technology, which I think is critical, you've got to figure out how to get the type of networking that makes you most comfortable.
And Joel, I'll add here that, you know, especially on LinkedIn, you know, the most important thing to do is to personalize the invitation or the message. You know, because online it can be very impersonable, so you really want to take that extra step and effort to personalize the message. So, and then Monica, what do you mean in the next tip by know your brand?
Yeah, exactly. And all great points, by the way, you know, that Joel made and you as well, Avery. I would say, you know, I would start first with a strategy. I mean, a lot of good relationship building emanates from a strategy, and that sounds, you know, inauthentic. So let me kind of explain what I'm talking about. You know, you want to start with thinking about what your brand is. What is your personal brand, you know, as a lawyer? And if you own a law firm or you're in a legal department, you're general counsel of the legal department, you know, what do you want your sort of legal department's culture to stand for, or your firm? What do you want your firm's culture and brand to stand for? So, you know, whatever your role is, you should be thinking about your brand, and, you know, that sort of serves as a filter and the guide for everything that you're doing on social media, and in terms of the type of relationship building you engage in, where you build relationships, maybe what kinds of events or activities you're involved with, you know, in terms of where you meet people. So that, you know, that is going to serve as a compass, you know, by which you are kind of navigating relationship building. And, you know, it's kind of a lot like technology in some ways, in my opinion. I mean, building really good technology that looks really simple is actually very, very hard to do. And so it's a lot like relationship building, you know, cultivating a network and building a brand that, you know, again, it's very authentic in terms of how it's carried out. It takes a lot of work and takes time and strategy and thought to have it done, you know, and to execute on that in an authentic way. And so in carrying these out, you know, let's say through social media, for instance, I mean, you want to look at, kind of as Joel touched upon, the different platforms, how are those different platforms used? What is the tone? Who's the audience? LinkedIn, of course, is more professional. It's a more professional audience. Facebook, you can get away with something that's a little bit more casual, maybe a more colloquial tone, maybe posts that are a little bit more fun, more entertaining. On Twitter, of course, you want to keep it short. You want to keep it crisp, but you always want to remember there's a record on Twitter, and is that what is coming back to you? What you're posting out there and putting out there is going to come back to you at some point. And so looking at keeping the posts, just because it's short doesn't mean it should be, curt or not well thought out or poor grammar. I mean, I see all kinds of things on Twitter, all kinds of mistakes by lawyers all the time, and in terms of what they're posting on Twitter. And I'm thinking, gosh, if they just spent a few minutes thinking about it before they posted it, because even though it's Twitter and these are short posts, it still warrants a little bit of thought before you just post something. And then, of course, on Foxworthy, other social platforms, being able to post something, Foxworthy, it's a defined audience. You're, in a specific legal audience, you can post things that are relevant to other legal counsel. But you want to look at, what is the platform you're on, who's the audience, and looking at keeping the tone and the nature of the posts, relevant to that audience. And then also, I'm a huge believer in giving back. One of the biggest things I see on social media engagement is, and even in-person engagement, frankly, is sort of that thinking about always, what's in it for me as opposed to what can I give to that other person. And I'm a huge believer in the best networking is often very altruistic at its core. It's about looking for an opportunity to build a relationship with somebody, and what can you do for them? And I mean, that manifests itself in a lot of ways. On social media, that means you're tweeting and sharing posts that other folks wrote. It means you're liking posts that other people wrote. It's about giving back, and that's going to come back to you. It's definitely going to come back to you in terms of what you post. Eventually, you're going to start to build a following. You're going to start to build relationships with people who will see, when you post something, they're going to tweet it, share it, post it as well to their network. And so it's really that give and take, and that as well, I'd carry that into the in-person into the in-person relationship building of the give and take of, building relationships with folks and offering to them, what can I do for you, and seeing that goes, a long way, always in the end.
Monica, you made the point about pay it forward, or the altruistic way of looking at networking. One of my personal turnoffs, and I've heard several people say this, is the self-promotion. I think it's so much better when somebody else promotes you and promotes your award or promotes your speaking opportunity, rather than you every single day, 10 or 12, LinkedIn's or tweets a day saying, here's me, here's what I won. So I think that if you can overdo the self-promotion, and I love the concept of promoting others, and you don't keep score, but when you do that, they're always looking to make you look good and put you in a good light as well. But it is a turnoff for me when I see somebody 20 times a day promoting themselves.
Yeah, totally. And even, when people reach out to you in your network, or even maybe it's a new connection, my first question is always like, how can I help you? What can I do for you? I mean, because it sounds trite, but it's really true. It builds relationships that last, and it always comes back to you. Maybe not necessarily from that person directly, maybe not right away, but it always comes back to you. And I mean, I've seen this time and again. I mean, I was even recently called just a couple days ago by a general counsel of a major company with offices all over the country. And, this is somebody I met once, but I made an impression on him. And he called me and said, I'm looking to make a move. You're one of the first person I thought of calling. I just wanted to kind of pick your brain on, what you think I should kind of consider or be doing. And I was very flattered that he called me, and I, of course, gave him, as many tips as I could. I made intros right away on LinkedIn after the call. And, I mean, he was extremely appreciative. But again, this is somebody who's not a client. It's just somebody that we struck up a great conversation. I followed up an email, and we kept in touch over the last few years. And so again, helping people when they ask you, especially when they reach out, it always goes a long way. And it doesn't matter whether they do something for you or not. I mean, it's a relationship that at some point will open new doors. I'm always confident that relationships always open doors, whether directly through that person or through somebody that they know. And it always comes back.
And the final point, do your homework. I know that both Joel and Monica, you've spoken about this. Joel, can you give us any final points on this?
Sure, and we have spoken about it, but I'll just give you, once again, a couple of vignettes that I think help make the point. They both involve diversity and inclusion. There's a woman of color, head of litigation at a large company that a large law firm wanted to meet with her. And she said, let me see the CVs of the people you're going to bring. And she read the CVs, and it was 3 white males. They all looked alike, acted alike, same years of experience. And she said, are you kidding me? Come back and give me a more diverse mix of profiles that are going to come and meet with me if you want to get in the door and compete for business. And they then brought back an Asian woman, a black male, and a white male. And they came and met with this person. And not a surprise to many, unfortunately, is the white senior partner talked about all the great things the firm could do. The Asian American woman talked about something. And when the in-house counsel asked to hear about diversity and inclusion, the black male spoke about diversity and inclusion, and she said again, are you kidding me? I mean, all the stereotypes that I don't want to see, I am seeing right now. And this goes back to doing your homework. And I make this point only because it's something with a little bit of homework you could figure out that the woman in-house was a black female. Now, I will tell you, as a white male, I would have been just upset. But boy, I mean, come on, do your homework. This woman was passionate about diversity and inclusion, had won a bunch of awards, was very active with a lot of diversity bar associations. This firm didn't do its homework. It just assumed it would roll out, what they wanted to roll out. It didn't ask the questions internally and externally, what does this in-house counsel want to see? And it was just a huge mistake, and it could have been obviated by just doing a little bit of homework. When I was in-house counsel and law firms were looking to do business with me, those that did best came in and said, Joel, we'd love to partner with you in pro bono. We'd love to figure out how we can help your legal group look smarter on CLEs. They understood that from my perspective, anything to make my team look good was going to be extremely attractive to me, and they got in my door and they got the opportunity to win the business. Lawyers that came in with their CV profiles and just talked about how great and smart they were and the rates they could give me, it just wasn't attractive. And if they had done their homework to figure out what was receptive to me in my position, they would have been a lot better off. So, theme takeaway, do your homework before you are doing formal networking.
Okay, great. And let's go into some audience questions here. We have many coming through, and one touches on the do's and don'ts of social media. And we have discussed, some of them, but, in all, if you could summarize maybe, your top do and top don't in networking on social media, that might be helpful to the audience.
Yeah, you want me to jump in, Avery?
Please.
Sure, that's a great question, very timely. So I mean, as a proprietor of Social Network for Lawyers, it's an easy one for me to talk about. First of all, I would definitely say, if you're not doing any social networking, I would say that's a missed opportunity. It's a huge mistake because there's a lot to be gained from social networking. So my first kind of short answer is yes, you should be doing social networking. Okay, and then the question is, how do I go about that? And again, the do's and don'ts. So the first thing I would think about is, again, going back to what is your brand? And this can vary, obviously, right, by are you in private practice, are you in-house, or, so where are you in the market? What segment are you in? Of course, if you're in-house, you're not necessarily going to be maybe looking at, pushing a brand. You're not having to generate business, but you might be looking at that next career move. What is that next career move? Or if you're in private practice, of course, and you're generating business, what is your practice? What's your specialty? What does your firm or practice stand for? Is it you're a family law lawyer and you help families navigate this challenging process of divorce and custody in an empathetic and legally sound way? You're the legal counsel with a heart. I don't know. Whatever your brand is, think about that. And then that should be your filter through which you post and share things. And then what you do is, you just begin to dip your toes in on social media and start engaging. Start forging connections. Start engaging with other people that post things that you think are very valuable that sync up with your brand. Again, you want to use that brand as the filter for everything. So, if your brand is that, for instance, let's say Compassionate Family Law Counsel, for instance, it would be very out of context for you to be posting something on SEC actions, right? It's like, doesn't relate to your practice. It doesn't make any sense in relation to your brand. So you want to kind of stay on brand, stay on target, and then that also helps drive any writing or speaking that you do. If you write a post, you can self-publish on LinkedIn. You can publish anything that you write from anywhere and just link it onto Foxworthy. You can put it on Facebook. You can tweet it out. I mean, so you write something once, That's the beauty of social media, and you can publish it everywhere, many times to a huge audience. So, maybe you write a short blog post on, why do legal counsel need to be compassionate, in the family law arena? Or maybe you're in a totally different area of practice, and, what makes you unique? Again, what is your brand? Write a post about that, and then put it out there. So, you're contributing some content. You're putting something out there that you've written, again, that's relevant to your brand and what you stand for. And at the same time, share, engage, like, repost, retweet, posts by others that are somewhat relevant to what you're doing or what you stand for. And that's what I would say are the do's. The don'ts are, like as Joel touched on earlier, don't just always post about you. Don't be, don't overshare. I've seen a lot of this happen too, where people kind of they just overshare or they share too much, all at once. And so again, you want to stage it out. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's twice a week. But you don't have to necessarily spend hours every day on Twitter sharing, every 10 minutes. And then the other thing is, in terms of the don'ts category, is keep the posts professional. I mean, if you are, again, these are professional posts. You're looking at, even if you're posting on Facebook or Twitter, it's really easy for people to just get really sloppy and super casual. And I would definitely caution against that. I would, try to stay on brand, keep them classy, keep your posts above board, and people will always remember that.
Yeah,
Joel,
Monica,
go
I
ahead.
100% agree with you, and obviously you're the person to give the best answer. I'm just going to give two short ones that are pretty similar but a little bit different. Number one, dip your toes in the water, as Monica says. I was not comfortable with it. I'm surely not 100% comfortable with it. I started with LinkedIn way before I got involved with Twitter. I personally think LinkedIn is an easy one to start, but do. So the first do is do it. Try it no matter who you are or what you're doing. The second one, don't forget that the record exists forever. I've seen so many tweets specifically that people delete, and then you still see them three weeks, 3 months, 3 years later. So just don't ever forget what there is there, even if you delete it 5 minutes later.
Great. All right, so let's move on to the agree-disagree section. And here Joel and Monica are going to share their take on a few statements. The first one, you can never network too much. Monica, do you agree or disagree with this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a huge believer in you can never network too much. It's just like you can never learn too much. Lawyers, like as in most professions, should always continue learning. They should always continue networking, relationship building. You can never do too much of it.
Joel?
I disagree with Monica a little bit, but I think we can end up reconciling that. I think a lot of people network too much incorrectly. They're either fake, they're either self-promoting, they're either doing tweets 25 times a day on areas of practice that they know nothing about. They're recommending for areas of expertise on LinkedIn lawyers that have no expertise in that area. So my view is if you're doing it right and you follow all the tips that we've hopefully spoke about and you can take away with you, I would agree with Monica. But if you do it wrong, there are a group of people I probably can put on both hands that I just think over-promote, over-network, and it's personally a turn-off to me.
Yeah, great point.
Okay. How about this statement? Networking is hard and requires special skills. Joel, do you want to take a stab at that one first?
Sure. I alluded to it at the beginning that I wish it was something that we taught in law schools. I wish it's something we taught in college and high school because I think it's so important. I personally think it's hard. I think it's hard developing your unique brand. It's hard selling yourself on social media and in person in large forums and small forums on this 1-hour call. Monica, Avery, and myself are networking. I think it's difficult. And I think for any of us, if we're honest, sometimes we get an A+ and hit it out of the park, and sometimes we may get a C- because we just weren't 100% where we wanted to be. I think adaptability is absolutely critical. The other part that I think is tough for the legal profession, whether you're a law student or 40-year partner, is this dichotomy between IQ and EQ. Very rarely do I meet an attorney or a law student that isn't smart, but I often meet lawyers that have that intellectual quotient capability, but they're lacking the emotional quotient capability. So I think that that's an area that is much more likely to make you an effective networker, the EQ, and it's something very few people study until they're in the legal profession, they realize it's something they can work on. So long story short, I think it does require special skills, and it requires skills that are not necessarily intuitive to the legal profession.
Yeah, I agree with that in many ways, and I'll slightly disagree only on the point of is everyone potentially capable of effective relationship building? And I would absolutely say yes, I do believe everyone is capable of it. Certain people will have a harder time than others and will have sort of more of a learning curve. If you're extroverted and you've got high EQ naturally, and again, these are things that are in personality, ingrained in personality and formed when we're children. If you've got strong EQ naturally and you're extroverted, then it's going to be easier for you. It's going to be less of a learning curve to kind of effectively build authentic and lasting relationships. If, however, that doesn't come naturally to you, maybe you're more introverted, or maybe you're just not as comfortable in large groups, or maybe you just haven't done as much of it, then it's a skill that would have to be sort of acquired over time, and being more cognizant of the emotional intelligence that's needed, and being cognizant of your skills that you do have, the strengths that you have in areas where maybe you're not as strong, will help you perhaps navigate relationship building in a way that works better for you. So for instance, if you're more introverted, I would say maybe you spend more time relationship building on social networking. Maybe if you're not as comfortable going to in-person events or large conventions or cocktail parties, then social media might be perfect for you. It's a great way to kind of forge those initial connections, and then you can eventually take it offline and meet or talk one-on-one. If, however, you're someone who, really isn't as comfortable on social media yet, you kind of prefer the more one-on-one, but you're still a bit more introverted and still developing relationship building skills, then you seek out events or opportunities where you're meeting with people one-on-one, or as Joel indicated earlier, sort of smaller, more intimate groups, and then you have that opportunity to speak one-on-one. So I am a believer in everybody can develop the skills. I agree. Unfortunately, they don't teach it in law schools. It's not cultivated, when lawyers come out and start practicing, whether in-house or in firms. It's just something that people have to begin to develop and cultivate. And I would also emulate others who are strong networkers. Look at what they do and follow and emulate what they do, and you'll begin to acquire some of those skills. And also remember that we all make mistakes. I mean, even, I'm sure Joel and I have made mistakes and constantly can keep learning. And networking in ways that are more effective, and build relationships in ways, we're learning things all the time as well. So I'm sure that there's always going to be an opportunity to continue to build on this skill.
And Monica and Joel, what I hear you saying, and what I've learned from my experience as well, is that networking takes some level of risk, in the sense that, when you're reaching out to someone, sometimes, as Joel, you said it, you hit it out of the park. Other times, you may fall flat in your face, so you just don't hear from anyone. So it does take that level of risk, which, in my opinion, I think is well worth it. So let's go on to our last agree-disagree. Professionals with less experience can add value to a networking conversation. What do you think about that, Joel?
Well, this is when you've hit a hot button, because I'm a big believer that whether you're the first-year law student or the 45-year partner, you have the right to say what you think and to be part of the discussion. I grew up in Accenture that did some really good leadership training, and one of the things that it taught is that leadership is defined as the ability to influence others, and not the number of stripes you wear. It's what you've earned based on what you do, not the number of years that you have practicing. And I have to tell you, I have learned more from that first-year law student than I have often learned from that 40-year partner, because I took the time to realize that person had something to say. I would implore anybody at whatever level to have a seat at the table. First of all, you will respect yourself more for it. Secondly, you will get more comfortable in doing what you're doing. Third, your ideas may generate a much better answer to whatever we're trying to solve. And that four, if the person that's much more senior is not interested in hearing what you have to say, I think the problem is on their end of the stick and not yours. My favorite story about networking and the difference between the senior lawyer and the junior lawyer is a partner at a large law firm in Chicago who, when he came into my shop in the late 1990s, spent so much time with that second and fifth and seventh year attorney versus the GC and the deputy GC. And he developed relationships with these lawyers. And he was smart enough to know that if I'm doing my job right and managing my lawyers, that those first, third, fifth, seventh year lawyers in a few years are going to be managers. They're going to be having influence over outside counsel decisions. And they may go somewhere else and have those same powers to make decisions about outside counsel hiring. 15 years later, I mean, he's got great relationships with these senior lawyers that are either at Accenture or somewhere else, and he's got a book of business and lots of eggs in the basket. It's all because he took the time many years ago to realize that the junior people had a right to say and be part of the networking that's so important today.
Yeah, I mean, excellent story, Joel. I definitely agree on this one. It's hard not to agree. I can't find a point to disagree on in terms of this topic because absolutely. I mean, building relationships with folks that, may not have as much to give you at the moment. I mean, again, that goes back to what I was mentioning about the good relationship building is altruistic at its core. It's really about looking for what can that other person, who is that other person and what can you do for that other person. And that ultimately always comes back to you, if not, directly from that person many years down the line, then indirectly through other things that come through for you or that happen for you as a result of that. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in never being closed-minded about networking and never closing your door to networking with somebody who has nothing to give or share at the moment. And quite frankly, I do believe, I enjoy networking with new lawyers, and often talk with them. They often reach out to me and, we'll speak with them about, what's happening, what are they looking for, what are they experiencing, and it goes back to that point we were talking about earlier on diversity and looking at, different perspectives. Folks that are just either, going through law school now or just entering the profession, they have great perspective on, what do they see for the law, what's important to them. That can parlay into a lot of different learnings if you are, let's say, running a law firm and you're hiring associate counsel, or you're running a law department, you're looking for your next crop of new lawyers to join the team, or whatever it may be, gathering sort of information as well, by speaking with and learning from people, at that stage in their career can also be very valuable to you. And in the course of that, you're sharing valuable tips and information with them that's truly helping them in their careers.
Great. So let's go on to one more audience question. What are some of the most unusual places you've networked? And I ask this because sometimes people may not take advantage of an opportunity in places that they may think are only traditional to networking.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm thinking about it. Number one, I will tell you, I travel a lot, and I traveled a lot more in my last job around the globe. But airplanes, you clearly get on that airplane, you put on your music, you watch your movie, you relax, you have a drink, you have dinner, whatever. The last thing you think you're going to do is networking. I can tell you probably 20 stories of meeting people that are now friends of mine that they've either helped me or I've helped them on an airplane. The other one is I have 3 daughters, and I coached one of my daughters in soccer for several years, and I did a lot of networking on the sidelines when I met people that were either lawyers or business people or students that were interesting to me, and I was hopefully interesting to them, and we forged relationships and ended up helping each other over the course of both of our professional and personal careers.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, there should be no limits on sort of context. Of course, I guess the only thing I would mention is just to always remember context. Context is everything, and especially with relationship building, there's something to be said for having enough EQ to kind of understand the context. And so, as Joel mentioned, being on a plane, sitting next to somebody, that's a perfect opportunity to talk with somebody. You're casual, you're kind of captive audience, for a flight, and being able to just talk on a personal level. I definitely would not, be pitching or anything like that, but just building that relationship, building that connection, as Joel indicated, that's perfectly acceptable and fine. And I would just say, always to remember context. If you're at an event for your kids or you're at some kind of social, kind of casual setting, it's a great way to build an initial connection, but just kind of, keep it light, keep it on the surface, keep it friendly. I wouldn't get into business. I wouldn't, there's certain contexts in which people, again, a social engagement involving their children or, maybe some kind of other kind of casual social function. Those are settings in which people may not necessarily want to be thinking too much about business at the moment. So kind of being keen to that and, talking with them sort of on the surface and keeping it casual and light, it helps to build the connection. But then you can follow up and find another time that's more appropriate to talk, more business, or at least until you build enough of a relationship with that person where you know them well enough, then in that casual social setting you can then begin to talk business. So those are things that I would keep in mind about context and thinking about what level of engagement is appropriate depending on the context and how well you know that person.
Yeah, and Monica, it sounds like, as you network, you further learn how to walk that line in terms of context and when, to keep it light as to when you can actually start talking business.
Absolutely.
So let's get on to our key takeaways. So here's what I learned on the webinar, that first, networking is about relationships. Monica and Joel, you emphasize the importance of being authentic when connecting people. And then second, that networking really takes work, and that it's critical that you prepare for networking events, meetings, or any type of interchanges by researching background information and understanding the context in which individuals work. The third point and takeaway that I've got is that a good networker adds value. You've got to figure out a way to be helpful, to connect individuals within your network with each other, and share pertinent or relevant information. And then the fourth is closing the network loop, that you've got to close networking loops. If you're networking for a job and you meet someone who could suggest other people in your field to touch base with, you need to follow up to gain those suggestions in order to make your networking efforts more productive. So if you see someone give a CLE and meet them at a reception, for example, watch for an article or something you could send in follow-up, to keep the relationship going. And what we've learned here, I think, is that networking is a process. It's an ongoing process that we can adapt to and that maybe even enjoy for those who may not enjoy networking at the moment. Does that sound about, the takeaways, from this conversation that we've had, Monica and Joel?
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Avery, I think you've done a great job of capturing things. I mean, I just wrote down as you were talking, adaptability, continuously improve. Nobody has mastered networking. Anybody that says they have is I think, not being 100% honest. You will always get better if you continue to learn from others. And then the final one, it's a view that I haven't been teaching people, and the older you get, the more important it gets to me, is have fun. You will find that if you do this right and you do it within the constraints that you're comfortable with and that you've learned today and you'll learn from others, it is fun to do networking, or as I say, relationship building.
It is. So thank you, Monica and Joel, and to our participants for your great questions, which we'll continue to answer on our website at www.abalcc.org. And also on our website, you can find resources related to networking that our speakers and some of our board members have written. Be sure to tune in next month in December to learn how to enhance your online presence. And join us every second Friday, same time next year in 2016, when my fellow Legal Career Central board members will be moderating career advice programs covering anything from practice readiness, alternate careers, and mindfulness in the practice of law. So on behalf of the ABA, thanks for tuning in, and please do stay online to fill in a brief evaluation. We always do appreciate your feedback and suggestions. Have a great weekend.